Now, without further ado, we will delve directly into the indigenous peoples of this land. The indigenous. When the enormous monoliths were uncovered from Mexico, the sculptured images that were carved to form 24-ton heads from a single mass of basalt rock had been discovered. No one suspected this mysterious part of a civilization that only seemed to have vanished. At the cultural paradox of this civilization, La Venta, 18 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, 4 colossal heads were unearthed. The monoliths had been carbon dated. The results of the carbon-14 tests of the stone heads found in Mexico caused a startling uproar amongst archaeological circles. Various additional testing was performed. However, the earliest date that the carbon testing came up with regarding the stone images was the year 291 BC. As more diggings were performed in Middle America, larger heads were discovered. 24 tons was the average sum of the weight. The new discoveries were even more mysterious, for the colossal heads continued to turn up even earlier dates. 4 heads in all were excavated at the city of La Venta alone, with the largest head standing 9 feet tall. Ancient Middle American civilizations, or Mesoamerica antiquity, is divided into 3 epochs: Archaic, before Christ; Classic, during the first 1,000 years AD; and Post-Classic, from 1000 AD to Spanish conquest. The monolith of La Venta was dated and placed in the Archaic period, which proved the existence of a civilization in Mesoamerica thousands of years before organized monotheistic religions. Perhaps more staggering than the result of the carbon dating of these stone figures is the apparent construction and proportions of the monoliths. According to archaeological circles, the statues were constructed from one massive chunk of basalt block mined from stone quarries 80 miles away and transported to the center of La Venta with a sum weight of 20 to 40 tons each. It seems these stones were rolled over vast tracts of land or transported down a river on wooden rafts, however, presenting somewhat of an illogical and even incomprehensible method of material transportation. The monoliths proved to be only elementary in cultural archaeology. At present, between 25 and 40 Archaic period Mesoamerican sites have been discovered. The majority of these finds have occurred in the states of Veracruz, which totals 246 recorded pieces with over 180 sculptures, altars, and stone heads. The revelation of this hidden civilization reconstructed the indigenous history that has now been extended to reveal a hidden past. It is apparent that the Archaic period preceded even some of the great civilizations of the East, 900 to 400 BC. The people of this period were not primates. These archaic indigenous inhabitants belonged to a class of Homo sapiens, thus leading to the belief that the ancient America, despite the narrow-minded kaleidoscope view of cave dwellers and tree climbers, was a highly advanced civilization. We see this in the advanced artistry and sculpturing, which was quite different than the art and sculpturing of tribal cultures. Mesoamerica archaeology proves enough data to suggest that these inhabitants were a high-status group with the presence of elite leaders, a military force, a political hierarchy, and a quite obviously, or at least sensible, penal system, as opposed to a primitive tribal culture's vigilante methods of punishment. Historians speculate on the actual racial identity of these inhabitants. Many hypotheses suggest that the archaic inhabitants were of Mayan linguistic stock. The contradiction to this hypothesis would be that the inhabitants spoke an ancestral form of mixed Zoqueen. Other historians speculate that the people who populated Mesoamerica were Mongoloid people who crossed over between Siberia and Alaska and were called Paleo-Siberian or ice hunters. Upon research in the etymology of the term Paleo-Siberian, we find paleo from the Greek word pale to mean ancient or primitive. Siberian has dual meanings. Sib from the Greek word sipa to mean kinship, family related by blood, and Aryan from the Sanskrit word Arya to mean noble in reference to the Persian language. Arya also denotes a sub-tribe of people who migrated from Turkey into Palestine and were given the name Caucasian from the regions of the Caucasus Mountains. However, the stone images were not the depiction of Siberians or Mongoloids. The archaeologists are not in agreement with the identity of these inhabitants, or more correctly, have denied indisputable truth of their origin. However, since the mysterious unearthing of the ancient civilizations, one name has surfaced from later transcriptions. The name was Olmec. Who were these people called Olmec? Can we speculate that these people of the colossal heads were Asians who crossed the Bering Strait, or Siberian icemen who migrated from Europe? Jose Maria y Serrano, upon excavating one of the monolith heads in this region of San Andreas Tuxtla, published a short passage in the Bulletin of the Mexican Geographical Statistical Society, and I quote, "As a work of art, it is without exaggeration a magnificent sculpture. But what most amazes me was the type that it represents, a Ethiopian African. I conclude that there had doubtlessly been black Negroids in this region from the very earliest ages of the world." Unquote. In 1939, Dr. Matthew Sterling led a joint team from the National Geographic Society into the Gulf of Mexico to spearhead a major digging operation in Veracruz to unearth the monolithic heads. Sterling concluded, and I quote, "The features are bold and amazingly Negroid in character." Unquote. The archaeological cultural data overwhelmingly confirms the depiction of Negroid faces. Further archaeological evidence of the Negroid in ancient America is found in the Monte Alban culture, which seems to have begun at the end of Olmec culture. In Monte Alban, 140 Negroid-type figures have been discovered. Upon archaeological research, there is no logical denying of the Negroidness found in the art of the ancient Americas. Although there has been denial amongst historians, archaeologists have indeed confirmed at least 4 major facts. Number 1, the Olmecs date back to the Archaic period. Number 2, the Olmec civilization parallels the dynastic periods of Egypt. Number 3, the Olmecs were not Paleo-Siberians or evolving Neanderthals. And number 4, evidence points to the Olmecs being of African ancestry. Skeletons have also been unearthed in pre-Columbian layers in the valley of the Pecos River that flows through Texas and New Mexico and empties into the Rio Grande of the Gulf of Mexico. Professor Houghton, a physical anthropologist, concluded, and I quote, "The Pecos skull resembles most closely the cranial of Negroid groups coming from Africa, where Negroes commonly have some perceptible infusion of Hamitic blood." Unquote.